Morning, all. All right, so we're looking at the 1934-1935 season. You'll notice the Bruins go back up to first after being last, so last first, last first. Bruins' way of things at that time. The Ottawa Senators have moved this season as well. They moved to St. Louis, become the St. Louis Eagles. It's done for financial reasons, with the Depression really having a stranglehold on things, and it does not help. The St. Louis Eagles have a miserable season on the ice and off the ice, and they would fold at the end of the 1934-35 season. But let's look at the standings. In the Canadian division, Toronto finishes first, 30-14-4, 64 points, their first overall, so President's Trophy curse again before we have one. The Montreal Maroons, 24-19-5 record, 53 points for them. The Montreal Canadiens, 19-23-6, 44 points. And some of the management decisions made that year lose them some fans. And basically, Montreal makes some trades that the fans don't like, and they don't work out. So you do that in Montreal, you don't last very long as a manager, and the Montreal Canadiens fans would have the Montreal Maroons to cheer for instead. The New York Americans go 12-27-9, 33 points. Really tough time for the Americans through a lot of their existence, not making the playoffs. But there's some really good players there. It's just a matter of not having the team, right? St. Louis Eagles, 11-31-6, 28 points. So that's a miserable season. And they were playing out of St. Louis Arena, which had a capacity of 14,200 people. The American Division, as I said, the Boston Bruins leading, 26-16-6 record, 58 points. They're coached by Frank Patrick. His brother Lester Patrick coaching the New York Rangers. So at some point during the season, these coaches are coaching against one another, marking a first. The first time that two brothers have ever coached against one another in the National Hockey League. The Chicago Blackhawks finished the season 26-17-5, 57 points, so just 1 point back of the Bruins. The New York Rangers finished 22-20-6 for 50 points, and again, coached by Lester Patrick. The Detroit Red Wings, their fortunes changed. They dropped to the bottom of the division, 19-22-7 record, 45 points. Due to the continuing depression, the NHL has to drop the salary cap down to $62,000. The salary cap would come and go during this era. Eventually, the NHL does away with it, but of course, the NHL would fight to get it back. $7,000 was the maximum that any one player could be paid in salary during that season. So tough times all around for the players, for the league, etc. Frank Boucher, the most gentlemanly player in NHL history, maybe. He wins the Lady Byng Trophy 7 out of 8 years, and so they gift him the original trophy. He gets the original Lady Byng Trophy, and so yeah, kudos to Frank Boucher for getting that. November 8th of 1934, it is the opening for St. Louis hosting a hockey game. 12,600 approximately in attendance for that first St. Louis Eagles home game. Sadly, they lose the game 3-1 to the Hawks, and also sadly, not the last of the losses that home crowd would see. And of course, that would be the 1 year that St. Louis has a team until 1967. November 19th of 1934, Eagles' Ralph Bowman scores the NHL's first penalty shot goal. It was the second penalty shot attempt. It was the first one that went in the net. And so Ralph Bowman is your trivia answer. The next time anybody says, who even knows who had the first ever penalty shot goal in the NHL? Well, actually, it was Frank Bowman back November 19th of 1934. But, I mean, everybody kind of knows that, right? And then crickets. The Red Wings and the Blackhawks join the others that have two uniforms. So the Americans, the Maple Leafs, now the Wings and the Hawks. The Wings adding a white one, the Hawks adding one that has different colored striping on it. They start bringing in the red at that time too. So there are other teams that just have the one jersey, including the Montreal Maroons, including the Montreal Canadiens, Boston, etc. But we're starting to see that home and away, and of course that's gonna be kind of the rule of thumb once we get to televised hockey, right? Because black and white TVs, they're both wearing dark colors. How can you tell who's who? So your first team All-Stars that year, Frank Boucher of the New York Rangers in the middle. Charlie Conacher of the Toronto Maple Leafs on the right side, and Busher Jackson of the Maple Leafs on the left side. Eddie Shore of the Boston Bruins on defense, alongside Earl Siebert of the New York Rangers, also a defenseman. Lawrence Chabot for Chicago. So I talked about how there were trades that didn't work out for Montreal. Yep, Lauren Chabot, one that got away. So Charlie Gardner passed away after winning the Stanley Cup with Chicago. Lauren Chabot has a fantastic season with Chicago the year after. Second team for Detroit, Cooney Wheeland down the middle. Dit Clapper of the Boston Bruins on the right side. Aurel Jolia of the Montreal Canadiens on the left side. Art Coulter of the Detroit Red Wings on defense, alongside Cy Wentworth of the Montreal Maroons, and then Tiny Thompson of the Boston Bruins in goal. So a lot of Hall of Famers on that first and second team, because in this era, almost anybody who was dominant ends up in the Hall of Fame. Your Hart Trophy winner is Eddie Shore of the Boston Bruins. So he'd been suspended 16 games the season before. Now he's the Hart Trophy winner. I'm sure that'd go over really well with today's hockey. A guy being suspended about a third of the season, getting the Hart Trophy the year after. The Lady Byng Trophy goes to Frank Boucher of the New York Rangers, as previously mentioned. The Rookie Award, which is not yet the Calder, Sweeney Schreiner of the New York Rangers, or New York Americans, I should say, wins that. The Vezina goes to Lauren Chabot of the Chicago Blackhawks, as he has the best goals against average in the National Hockey League. Your leading scorer that season is Charlie Conacher of the Toronto Maple Leafs, 47 games, 36 goals, 21 assists, 57 points. Sid Howe, split between St. Louis and Detroit, because St. Louis is selling players. They're continuing what the Ottawa Senators started, realizing we can't afford to pay everybody. We're going to have to sell some players off. That's not good. Imagine, again, it's one of those things where it's like, imagine if that happened now. If a team was like, well, we had to sell him because we can't afford to pay everybody. Yeah, okie dokie. But yeah, Sid Howe, 50 games, 22 goals, 25 assists, 47 points. Larry Orey of the Detroit Red Wings, 48 games, 17 goals, 29 assists, 46 points. Frank Boucher of the New York Rangers, 48 games, 13 goals, 32 assists, 45 points. Busher Jackson for Toronto, 42 games, 22 goals, 22 assists, 44 points. Art Chapman of the New York Americans, 47 games, 9 goals, 34 assists, 43 points. Herbie Lewis of Detroit. And I thought, so he's not quite Herbie and he's not quite Huey Lewis. Makes sense. So for Detroit, 47 games, 16 goals, 27 assists, 43 points. Marty Berry of Boston, 48 games, 19 goals, 21 assists, 40 points. And Sweeney Schreiner of the New York Americans, who won the Rookie of the Year. In 48 games, he had 18 goals, 22 assists, 40 points. Not bad for a rookie season. In net, George Hainsworth leads goaltenders in wins, playing for Toronto. Record of 30-14-4, 2.25 goals against. And the first Toronto Maple Leafs goaltender to have 30 wins in a season. Lauren Chabot for Chicago, 26-17-5, 1.8 goals against average. That's a pretty good year. Tiny Thompson for Boston, 26-16-6, 2.26 goals against. And Alex Connell for the Montreal Maroons just keeps being excellent. 24-19-5 record, 1.86 goals against average. So pretty close to the Vezina there for Connell, but Chabot wins it. So we get to the playoffs. In the playoffs, we're still doing it the same way. Yep, total goals, 2-game series, except for the series that aren't. So in the quarters, Chicago and the Montreal Maroons meet. It's a scoreless draw in the first game, and in the second game, Montreal wins in overtime by a score of 1-0. So they have the only goal of the series and move on. On the other side, the Rangers beat Montreal 2-1 in the first game, and then they tie Montreal at 4 in the second. So they win by a combined score of 6-5. In the semis, the Montreal Maroons beat the New York Rangers 2-1 in game 1, and then tie the second game 3-3. So the Montreal Maroons win 5-4 in a combined score there. The other semifinal is Toronto and Boston, which at this point in time seems like it's a bad matchup for Boston, oddly enough. 1-0 double overtime win for Boston. That's where the happiness ends for the Bruins. Toronto wins the second game 2-0. Then they go home. They win the third game 3-0. And they win the fourth game in overtime by a score of 2-1 to win the series 3-1. In the Stanley Cup final, it's the Montreal Maroons and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maroons do pretty well here. They go into Toronto, they win 3-2 in overtime in the first game. They win 3-1 in Toronto the second game, and then they go home and they win 3-1 to sweep the Stanley Cup final 3-0, because we're not into a best of 7 Stanley Cup final series just yet. But there you go. You guys are all caught up on the 1934-35 season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.